Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in to WGL Live. I got Dan Wass with me. Dan, say hi to everyone.
Hey, everyone. How's it going? Bill. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate
Brother,
it.
thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it. And I'm going to do your introduction first, and then I'm going to tell everyone how we got connected, because it was a video of yours that was the inspiration for all of this, okay? So Dan Wass, nationally recognized Second Amendment advocate, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, link down below in the description box, and a series, host of a series also by the same title, Good Gun, Bad Guy Radio. Also the host of The Loaded Mic, linked up down below, CEO of Wass Corp Media, and also currently running the Gun Owners Foundation's YouTube channel, which is where I found that video. Listen, he's spoken in just about every state. He's a huge Second Amendment advocate, published author, contributor in many, many publications. Everybody who is anybody in the industry knows who Dan is. Dan, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking time all the way back there in New York. I know it's a little later, so thanks for being here, brother.
Excellent. No problem at all. I appreciate the invite. And I'm assuming, what do you want to talk about? Guns and stuff?
Well, actually, I want to get into something much deeper than guns, because, we talk about guns, we can talk about gun laws, but we're going to do a real serious geek out session, as I like to call it, because let me tell the viewers here. So I'm actually sitting on a ferry. So for those of us, when I say a ferry boat, in Washington State, sometimes you have to travel across the Puget Sound. And so I'm sitting there watching YouTube, and I run across a video of Dan's on Gun Owners Foundation. That video is also linked up down below. And it was this amazing, very brief, but really thorough and deep conversation about how we are all being manipulated by the gun control movement, and how not only are we being manipulated into civilian disarmament, but worse than that, we are intentionally ignoring a real problem and allowing our communities to actually become more and more dangerous by the day. Very, very serious stuff. And so instead of talking about guns, I think we should talk about psychology, sociology, criminology, economics, communications, and then we'll sprinkle a bunch of politics on top of it. What do you think of that?
That sounds like a potpourri of stuff that I'm not sure I know about, but let's go.
Well, so here's where I want. First of all, this video is as I went back and did some research about you, it's a culmination of a lot of research that you've done for many, many years on we're going to call it the civilian disarmament movement, because we'll get into the labeling in a bit, but let's call it what it really is, right? Because you don't control an inanimate object, so it's civilian disarmament. But why don't you kind of trace your history, because you've been diving into this for many years now, and where we finally get to where we are today. But tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've told this story before, and the way it started for me was I was raised in a pro-gun family. My dad took me hunting and target shooting and all that stuff. But I went, and as you and I were talking earlier, I went to guitar. So I started playing guitar at an early age, and I played in rock bands and stuff like that. So I was never really interested in guns. And it was really an interesting time when my wife and I were, we're coming out of a late night movie theater, Crossgates Mall in Albany, New York.
Yeah.
We ran into this guy, and we had this bit of a struggle. It could have been a dangerous situation, but we got to the car, and she was okay. I was okay. And I realized in that moment that I may not have been able to protect my wife. And at the time I wouldn't say anti-gun, but I wasn't really a gun advocate, Second Amendment advocate or anything like that. But it all changed that night when you realize that you may be putting yourself in danger because you're avoiding the most valuable life-saving device that you could have in your life. So anyway, we got back to the car, and I apologized to my wife, and she said, "Well, why are you apologizing?" I said, "Because I don't know that I would have been able to protect you tonight." I said, "I'm getting a gun." And everything changed in that moment. It was like one of those aha
moments, right?
Moment of clarity, where you realize that the way you've been thinking about things is all wrong and destructive could be potentially destructive to your life. So Everything changed. I did an article at that point. I wrote a little article. It's called "The Fear of Guns," and I think I can't remember. I can't remember what publication took it up, but it started making its way around the internet a little bit. And I said, "Well, this is kind of cool." So it turned into the first chapter of my first book, "Good Gun, Bad Guy," and from then on. Well, my friend Jan Morgan in Arkansas brought me on to some radio shows, and before you know it, I'm doing Sean Hannity's show and Ted Nugent's show, and writing a 3-book series, spokesperson for Gun Owners of America, and it all just kind of came to a big. It built right up to this Second Amendment advocacy position that I find myself in. I'm honored to be here, and I've been studying for the last 10 years on this stuff. It's such a complicated topic.
It is.
Talk about gun laws on one hand. We could talk about the anti-gun narrative on the other hand. We could talk about the propaganda. We could talk about the mindset of anti-gun people. We could talk about it's a wide matrix of.
It really is. It really is. And what I want first for the viewers that are watching here is that listen, Dan and I both recognize that there's a handful of people that are severely dug in on the civilian disarmament movement, but there's a lot of people who are just go along to be along kind of folks, and they're kind of ambivalent. And I think what you described to us earlier, Dan, where you may have been that night coming out of that theater, it wasn't you were anti-gun, you were just kind of ambivalent to it, right? It was whatever, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden you had that epiphany, that moment where it's like, aha, now I understand the value of that right and why it needs to be exercised. And so what I want people to do is to spread this video to those people that are ambivalent, because I want them to understand, because what Dan's going to educate you on tonight is about how this issue has not only been distorted significantly, but is actually making our lives more dangerous. And candidly, we're cheating humanity in the way we're going about doing this. Agreed?
Well, that's a great point. That's a great way to look at it. We're cheating humanity. Yes, you're right. Yeah. Because we're putting our lives in such danger when we don't protect ourselves. It's surprising to me that more people aren't getting hurt. Who don't carry a gun,
right?
But so so we can go anywhere you want with this.
Well, here's the first turn we're going to take. All right, so back in a previous career, everyone knows I was a criminal defense attorney, and at one point I had a very successful practice that was based on representing impaired drivers. And unfortunately, with impaired drivers come horrific car accidents in which people are seriously injured or killed, and it is in almost all instances the driver's fault, and the intoxication absolutely positively contributed to the deadly collision. And I have done sentencing hearings where people are going to prison, and there are families left of people that are now deceased, and they are screaming bloody murder. And there is no jail time you can give a person in that situation. That's enough. No one has ever screamed about banning the cars or banning the booze. It was always about the idiot who got behind the wheel of the car. Why, though? Why, when it comes to violence committed with a firearm, okay? Because we're going to avoid the labeling, and we'll explain why in a moment. But why, when it comes to violence that is committed with a firearm, do we suddenly, and for whatever reason, only talk about the firearm?
This is a long, complicated conversation, but let's start here. Okay. It's because the political left wants their political opposition unarmed. So you talk about, the car. Why isn't the car, why don't we blame the car for the accident? Right? Or why don't we blame Jack Daniels?
Right.
Because it doesn't make any logical sense to do that, because when it's convenient for them, they know that they need to focus on the human being who took the action. But it's also very convenient for them to switch the narrative and blame the gun, because that's the thing they really want to get rid of. So, gun control is really just for the purpose of disarming people. And, the narrative is created of a bunch of different things. We have the terminology is one of the things that I'd like to talk about. the term gun violence. There's no such thing as gun violence. It's human violence, which is exactly what you're talking about.
There it is. Well, and let's talk about some of the other terminology, which is like this one.
Assault weapon, yeah.
Right?
I've never seen a weapon assault anybody.
Nope. I have never seen a criminal complaint charge a weapon with the actual act of assault. Here's the one that really drives me nuts.
Yeah, gun control. Yeah, what you're trying to control the gun? Why don't you control the bad guys?
Instead, yeah.
Instead,
if you throw a rock through a window, of a store, it's not a lack of rock control.
No,
that's the problem in that situation. So let me because here's the thing. Where we're about to go is, and this is where you're going to get to do some serious educating. That term right there.
It's an interesting topic. Yeah,
it is a fantastic. Well, this is what really spun me. You want tell everyone how to pronounce it.
I had a heck of a time trying to pronounce it. Anthropomorphize.
That's right. Anthropomorphization. That's right. And why don't you tell everyone it? Because this is when I was watching that video and you brought that up, I was like, oh wow, that's it. Oh my gosh! So tell everyone about this.
Well, to anthropomorphize something is to give it human traits, give it human characteristics.
To take an inanimate object and give it human-like characteristics and traits.
Exactly, because we are more emotionally attached to something if it has emotion, if we believe it has emotion or character, or some level of humanity. We're more emotionally attached. Just like, this table here in my studio, I have no attachment to this table other than it holds up all the equipment. But if there's a person in the room, that's a different story. Now you're talking about humanity. You're talking about emotion. You're talking about character. You're talking about communication.
Right. Same with a pet, a real pet, right?
Exactly.
There is connectivity. There is the ability to connect on a human level with that pet to whatever degree you could connect, and just right.
Yeah. And here's the interesting thing. People who need to connect will often connect with inanimate objects by anthropomorphizing them. So in other words, people will take maybe a teddy bear. You'll see a picture of a girl with a teddy bear. She, hugging the teddy bear, almost as if it is a human. So we can attribute characteristics to inanimate objects. Okay, so that being said, this is why. Let me go here, and it's the same. It's the same way that the abortion argument is created. You see,
except it's actually reversed because what happened, right? Because what happens in the civilian disarmament argument is we actually attach emotion to an inanimate object, whereas with the abortion argument, what people on one side of the argument will do is they will remove humanity and literally turn it into an object to further. They dehumanize it rather than actually humanize it, and this is the emotional and mental game that's played. Right, wrong, or indifferent. We're just pointing this out. That's played on both of these issues.
Yeah. That's a great way of putting it, because when if you can attach human characteristics to a gun, you can get people more emotionally worked up over the gun.
Well, you can relate to it like you would with people who you are angry at or something like that, right? There's an ability to relate to it on a quasi-human level all of a sudden.
Right. And if you take a baby in the womb and you just call it a clump of cells, you're creating a way for people to disconnect from the humanity of that baby.
That's right.
And it's easier for them to kill the baby because they don't consider it a baby. They've taken the humanity out. Right. With the gun conversation, they're putting the humanity in by calling it gun violence and assault weapon and giving it human characteristics.
Well, and calling their laws they pass gun control.
Yeah, gun control, exactly. So,
Mhm.
so this is all part of the
Yeah.
narrative and how it's so powerful and so
Yeah, but here's the problem. Here's the problem. We spent all this time, just like we just did in the last few minutes, we're talking about this. But I said at the very beginning that, listen, we're going to talk about psychology, we're going to talk about sociology, criminology, economics, communications, politics. Doesn't all of that actually contribute to our violence problem in this country? In some way or another, and again, isn't every violence issue, isn't it like a snowflake in the way that there's no two that are exactly like? The motivation for why a person commits a horrific act of violence, you can go find 10 people who got booked into jail in the last week over it, and the motivation for all 10 of those people is going to be different to some degree.
Exactly, good point. Because a person who, crazy lunatic who goes and shoots up a school, thanks to Joe Biden's gun-free school zones as part of the Crime Control Act in 1990.
True.
They'll go and they'll shoot up a school. They'll have whatever deranged reason they have is going to be different than somebody who tries to kill a president.
Right. Or rival gang members shooting at each other in the street somewhere, or
Completely
whatever other types of violent situations we have involving the use of a firearm.
Completely different intent in all the cases, completely different reasons for doing it. I'm not condoning any of it, of course.
None whatsoever. And if you trace way back what led that person to that ultimate decision, because it's not just one big decision, there's thousands of little decisions along the way that led a person to that point in their life, of which all of those people have gone upon a different path in humanity as well.
Exactly. And a lot of conditioning and brainwashing too that goes along with. Look what's going on the political left. I mean, I don't know if we want to get political today, but they're by convincing people that Charlie Kirk was a Nazi or something, or some evil guy.
Well, they're removing humanity. They're doing right because it's either an injection of humanity where it does not belong, or the subtraction of humanity from where it clearly does belong. That's where they're doing it.
And people who can't think for themselves will fall right into those traps. And a lot of people fall right into that. You watch these protests and stuff and you see them just following along. They don't even know what they're talking about. They don't know the policies. They don't know really what's going on, but they know that they're part of an organization. And when people are insecure, we've all been there,
or detached, or just detached.
Yeah. Well, think about junior high school, everybody, we're all insecure kids. But there was that popular table. Remember the popular table? Now, I don't know if you sat at the popular table, Bill, but I certainly did not. And I think you probably did though, right?
Hey, whatever.
But you look at the popular table, and some kids just wanted to be there more than anything else.
But some kids didn't give two shits that they weren't there either. Exactly. That's the other thing, right?
Yeah. Some of us,
God bless them. God bless them. They were the freest ones of the bunch. You kidding me? They're the freest ones of the bunch.
And that's the fantastic part about it, because some of us could just, flip the popular table, the bird, and not even care.
It didn't matter.
Well, but there's some people who really need that acceptance. Mm-hmm. So when the left wing, when the Democrat Party welcomes people in like that and says, you're part of something that's very special now, you're the good guys, and here's our mission. We're going to take down those terrible Republicans. For people who can't think for themselves, people who have low esteem, people who don't have a good level of confidence, they will go right there because it makes them feel good. Right. So that's part of it too. That's why I say this whole conversation is very complex, and there's a lot of moving parts. It is, and it's hard to stay apolitical. And I didn't say we were going to stay apolitical, because again, when we're talking about this stuff, it's impossible to do. And again, if we're talking about what's happening again from a public and political violence standpoint right now, and this time in our country, there's no doubt it's coming predominantly, if not exclusively, from one side of the spectrum. That's just the facts. I mean, that's just what's going on. Okay, but all right. So let me ask you this though: what is the motivation? If
ultimately we have this strong desire to reduce human violence, which candidly I can't see why no modern society would want to do anything but that, right? Reduce human violence. And we're clearly got to go on this long exploration of what causes it and all of that. Why don't they seem to be willing to do that?
We tell them all the time, and we show the gun grabbers, the anti-gun lobby, we show them how what they're doing is failing. Their gun-free zones are a huge failure. Their uh, background checks do nothing to stop bad guys.
Yeah, the magazine bans, the assault weapon
Magazine,
bans, just yeah,
all of it.
right.
We show them time and time again that this stuff doesn't work, and we also show them, by the way, that they're up to 2.5 million defensive gun uses per year in America. That means good people are defending themselves, stopping violent attacks up to 2.5 million times a year. And I'll give you a few statistics here. That was the Gary Kleck, Mark Gertz study,
Right.
the resistance to crime, I think it was called. 2.5 million. Then there was a CDC study that Obama didn't want released, and that showed 2.46 million defensive gun uses per year in America. And then there was the Georgetown University study. Even the Georgetown University study came up with 1.67 million defensive gun uses per year. We tell them this stuff, they know it. So you have to ask yourself, do they really want to keep people safe? Or is there another motive here?
Is there another motive? Is it almost like what you hear about the pharmaceutical companies? Like, do they really want to cure cancer? I mean, a lot of people would go broke all of a sudden if they cured cancer, right? So, like, and I'm not saying, well, there are people getting rich off of civilian disarmament. There's no doubt about it, but it's more about a power grab. So, what happens if we were to really do an honest exploration of, hey, what creates human violence? Let's just talk about what creates human violence in the United States. That's what matters to us here right now.
Yeah.
Why would they be resistant to that?
Because human violence, this is going to be very controversial.
Okay.
Human
This is why we're doing it. Let's hear it.
Human violence pays a dividend to particularly the left wing. Because if the left wing can create a victim predator society, it's much easier to keep people under control. If they're the good people, if they're unarmed, if they're helpless, defenseless, it's easier to control those people. And by the way, promise them safety, of course, by just got to vote for me and we'll keep you safe, of course. That's also part of the campaign promise. But by creating a victim predator society, you're keeping people dependent on government, on police, you're keeping people vulnerable and scared and dependent. Take away all our guns, we're going to be like Venezuela, throwing rocks to defend ourselves.
Not working out real well for them either, by the way.
No, exactly. So, but by doing that, and that's not the only place that the Democrats want to keep people vulnerable. They also keep them vulnerable through the welfare system. If you can keep people dependent on government for their housing and their food and everything else,
healthcare,
you've got built-in voters. And that's why you'll always see, the people like, Beto O'Rourke. Remember Beto?
Oh, how can we forget Beto?
Of course, we're going to ban the AR-15s. Vote for me, and we'll keep you safe. We'll get rid of
he's like the Olympics, man. He comes around about once every 4 years. It's like, oh God, we got to deal with Beto again for a few months here. God.
But it's easier to. The summary is, it's easier to control people if they're vulnerable.
Do you think that if we actually went down here, I'll give you a loaded question, all right? Because I think what you said is, I don't know if it was that I mean, yeah, there will be a big chunk of the country that disagree with what you say, but I do agree that there's a significant desire for power there. But let me ask you this: do you think that if we actually went down an honest exploration as to what creates human violence, we would discover that many progressive policies help contribute to that creation of violent tendencies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, well, you can also talk about, drugs,
Right.
SSRI drugs and things like that. There's a ton of reasons why people do it. But I look at the biggest reason people commit crimes like that, and violence and murder and gang related violence and all this stuff, is because a lot of times they know their victims are unarmed and helpless. Go to Chicago. The gun restrictions are crazy. A lot of these cities where there's the most gun restrictions, the worst gun laws in the country, have the worst crime.
If gun laws actually save lives, Illinois, California,
Yeah.
and your state, New York,
Yeah.
would be three of the absolute most safest states in the United. Heck, they would be like Shangri-La. They
Yeah.
would be that peaceful there. Okay,
It would
that's
be
how great they
paradise.
would be. It would be nirvana. That's what it would be. All right. And that's not the case. And if for those of you watching, if you really want to do a morbid little exercise every Monday, just get online, go to the Chicago Tribune or Chicago Sun-Times, something like that, and just check out the numbers for the weekend. Because I guarantee you, every weekend, if it's been a 3-day holiday weekend, oh God, especially in the summer, but on a normal weekend, you're going to get 55 to 65 shot, about 10 to 12 dead, and half of the people, more than half of the people who are being shot and killed here are unintended targets. There's people being caught in the spray.
Sure.
And yeah, Illinois passes more and more gun laws because I think just at any moment, Dan, they're going to get just the right cocktail of gun laws.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, like with New York, they've run out of gun laws here in New York. There's
There's nothing left to take
anymore.
You're right.
It's that bad, So what? Kathy Hochul, the Wicked Witch of the East Coast, she implemented a ammunition background check now. So now you have to, if you're going to buy ammunition in New York State, you're going to be put on the state police registry. So enjoy your box of 9mm because
and you get to pay for that background check. So all right, let me this is kind of the last subject I want to talk to you about, though, and I think this is important because before we went live, you and I were talking about this. By allowing this messaging to perpetuate the way like it is, okay, and allowing the left to continuously place human blame on an inanimate object, we are actually cheating humanity. We are actually taking a moment in time where we have made massive advancements in mental health and trying to explore mental health and taking a look at a lot of other various factors that go into this. There's never been a greater opportunity for humans to learn more about humans and maybe better ourselves as a society. And yet we're not doing any of that. And I want you to kind of explain to the viewer the significant cheating of ourselves that we're doing by allowing this to continue.
By allowing gun control?
By not just gun control, but the messaging related to gun control. The messaging, yeah.
Because we're not allowing ourselves to see things the way they really are. And people are living in this dream, this dream world. There are people on the anti-gun side who actually believe that, we need that one more gun law, that one more gun-free zone, or that universal background check. Are you kidding me? But they believe that the reason we have the violence is because we don't have enough gun laws, when the reality is it's exactly the flip side of that. It's the exact opposite. We have too many. We shouldn't have any gun laws, in my opinion. Our founding fathers made that pretty clear, shall not be infringed. I don't know how else you would interpret that, but apparently they find ways.
It's gotten creative over the years. Yes, I will give you that.
Got to give them that one. They get creative. Yeah. So what happens is we end up living in this fantasy world. Not all of us, not you and me, and not the people, most of the people watching this, but there are a lot of people in our society that live among us who believe that they don't question the constitutionality of gun laws. They ask, what what new ones can we implement?
Yeah, because the ones we got right now still not working. Every time I look at the paper,
Still not working, are they?
if we got all these gun deaths occurring. Well, what else do we need to do?
Yeah. They think we need more because that's what they're told. They're convinced that there's a such thing as gun violence. They're not focused on, this is I think what you're talking about, is they're not focused at all on the reality, which is human violence. Why aren't we talking about what causes human violence? Why aren't we talking about those things? Because the anti-gun crowd and the left-wing media doesn't want you to see that stuff. They purposely redirect everybody away from that stuff so we can talk about the guns. Yeah, the first thing that happens after a school killing, nobody talks about Joe Biden's Gun-Free School Zones Act. The first thing they do is they roll that AR-15 across the screen and tell you this is the problem. We need more gun control law. And it's so ridiculous.
Well, because if you take some nut job who goes and stabs a bunch of people, at a mall or something like that.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Well, but we don't start talking about taking the knives or anything. It's not the knife.
You know what's funny, Bill, is in the UK they actually are trying to do that. They've gone that far where they're trying to ban the knives, and they've actually got knife drop-off boxes in the city of London.
Yes, listen. The UK by the day proved that the greatest decision in the history of the world was made on July 4th of 1776. Okay, that was the greatest decision ever made in the history of the world. End of story.
I love when the Brits try to lecture me on gun control. I say, didn't we kick your ass? Yeah. And didn't we do it with guns? It's so funny, but you got to understand they're caught up in that narrative, and I think that most of them really believe in that whole gun control.
Well, they believe in knife control now. You're right. They've taken it to the next level where it's like we need to start, and it's like, but why are people running around wanting to stab and slash people? Why is that the problem?
Well,
I mean, what's going on there?
Here's why. Well, there's a couple other things I'd love to talk about if we got any more time.
This is the beauty of the live thing, man. We got no hard stop. I do got the World Series game on. I want everyone who is actually tuning in to know that freaking Blue Jays went yard to start the game. They hit 2 solo shots, and they're up 2-0 right now in like the second. So crazy. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, right now, I kind of forgot what I was. Well, let me tell you a little story. I just wrote about this in an article. I mentioned this, and I wrote about this in my book. There's an interesting piece here where people think that it's the gun that causes the violence, or they'll go as far as saying it's the gun that causes the person to become violent.
Oh,
the total lack of responsibility, lack of personal awareness, lack of
was created by the gun.
Right, it's created by the gun. So I've told this story probably 1,000 times because it was so important when it happened. It really made me recognize. So I knew this woman who was she was definitely anti-gun, and she's telling, when I first started getting into this, when I wrote my first book, she starts telling me how, well, we need gun control and we need more gun laws and all this stuff. And I was doing my best to try to educate her. And she said, and I said, why? I said, we really tried to get to her. Like, what is the real problem here? What is this fear of guns or this hatred of guns? Well, Dan, she goes, I was in the bank. And there was this guy in line at the bank with a gun on him. It was right there in plain sight. And she's telling me this story. It was a security guard or whatever. He was probably cashing his check or depositing his check or whatever. And I said, what's the problem with that? So what? So the guy had a gun, security officer, whatever. Okay.
All right.
And she could not get over the fact that this guy had a gun. And I'm saying, what is the problem? Why is that such a problem for you? She says, Dan, I can't believe you. I could have easily taken that gun out of his holster and started shooting people. And I'm like, wow. You had to imagine yourself pulling the gun out of the guy's holster and killing people. This is the problem. these leftists, these anti-gunners, they don't want you to have a gun because they don't trust you,
They don't
because they
trust
don't trust
themselves.
themselves.
They don't trust themselves with a gun. Yeah.
It's a scary thought when you really think about it.
Well,
So
it's really demented in a way.
it is. Ask
To
yourself,
be
who are you more concerned?
to be so brainwashed in the inanimate object to think that that inanimate object would create the need, desire, or want
Yes.
to
Yes.
suddenly just go, berserk,
Yes.
and then be able to do it full John Wick style and disarm the security guard, start shooting the place up all.
Well, and not even realizing that what she's telling me is what she's thinking. She didn't even.
Well, the thought had to have popped in her head at some point, right?
Well,
I mean, it just doesn't come out your mouth without at least ricocheting around in the head for a nanosecond, right?
It's so revealing of these people. Who would you be more concerned with? The security guard with the gun on his hip, or the crazy woman who says she's imagining herself taking it and killing people? It's just unbelievable that they think this way, but yet people don't understand projection. Sigmund Freud coined the term projection. It's when we put our thoughts and intentions onto other people. In other words, I'm convinced that I know exactly what you're thinking, Bill, because by the way you moved, or by the way your face, you made a certain face. I know what you're thinking.
You know where you frequently hear that one is disguised as this one. Well, he doesn't really have any right to feel that way.
Yeah, yeah, great. Yeah, exactly.
That is a classic. Yeah. Not coming right out and saying it, but saying, well, no, that's exactly what you've done there.
Yeah. And well, to imagine that somebody would project onto others that she thinks that just because there's a gun, that other people are going to take that gun and do something bad with it. In other words, that gun's going to make them do bad things. It's a crazy thing, because we all project, we all do that, but we don't always realize when we're doing it. And when we do, and you watch people do it, it's hysterical, because they don't know what your intentions are, but what they are doing is they're revealing their own intentions. That's a much scarier thing to me.
I agree completely. All right, listen, why don't you tell everyone who wants to follow you all the different places, because Dan Wass is all over the place. We were talking before we went live. You are literally all over the place. So give everyone all the different various platforms and things like that where they can find you and where they can find the book. And of course, all of this is linked up in the description box. But go ahead, Dan.
Well, the best place is go to goodgunbadguy.com. It's a 3-book series, and you can find all my other stuff, interviews that I've done. I did an interview with Ted Nugent, which was a lot of fun.
I bet.
So goodgunbadguy.com. You can also go to my show, The Loaded Mic, and that's loadedmic.com, loaded M-I-C, like microphone, loadedmic.com. I also do a video series for gun owners of America called Bullet Points with Dan Wass. And you can go to the Gun Owners Foundation page over at YouTube. But
where you get the really awesome studio too. Is that your home studio that you do this from?
No, this is our studio in upstate New York. We have several sets here. We produce podcasts and web shows.
You guys got a nice studio. I want to get out there one day. I'll know I've really made it big time when I'm sitting out in your guys' studio someday.
Well, we've got quite a operation going now. We started off very small. We've got a bunch of clients, and we're doing good at it's called Wasscorp Media. You can go check that out too at wasscorp.com. But goodgunbadguy.com is the best place. Goodgunbadguy.com.
Man, I hope you enjoyed this.
It's great. Let's do it again.
I would love to do this again. So listen, folks, we're gonna run the ending video. For those of you who want to drop comments down there, I will check them out a little bit later on tonight and reply to some of them. Again, check out everything in the description box for Dan on all of his various platforms. Check out his 3-book series. It's absolutely fantastic. Dan, brother, thanks a million. That was fun. Let's do this again.
Thanks. I appreciate it.